So we're going to speak about the Bhagavad Gita, because the Bhagavad Gita, you normally in the 200 hours, you'll speak about the 8 limbs, and you'll speak about Patanjali's sutras, the yamas, niyamas, all these different things. A lot of the time, a lot of 200 hours, they don't even mention the Bhagavad Gita. And I know that I didn't really go deep into it and study it very much until I'd started doing my 500 hours. But I found that, you know, the more I've delved deeper into it and have applied it to my practice and my life, it makes your yoga practice and your life, it makes it much more sense. So with the Yoga Sutras is almost like a systematic approach, a methodology of how to how to gain enlightenment, in a sense, and it's in three parts. And they tend to, when you study the sutras, the third part is basically on the siddhis, the superpowers that you can attain the more you really get into your practice. So it's something that you don't really touch upon. And I'm not really going to touch upon superhero powers as much as I'd love to. So I quite like things like that, but we're not going to. The Bhagavad Gita, though, I would say it's almost like the handbook for how to live your life. And you know, I think that's a lot handier than methods to reach enlightenment, because, you know, as much as it's great to know the methods of how to get there, how to still your mind, and, you know, which is yoga. Yoga, according to Patanjali, is the cessation of the fluctuation of the mind stuff. But according to the Bhagavad Gita, yoga is skill in action. So, and this is basically, and there's so many other different translations of what the Bhagavad Gita translates as, and we're going to go deeper into that. But, you know, as you're getting used to me, you know that there's these like really complex subjects, and I could go deep into the complexities of it and use really large words and ideas, but it's not going to, I think it's the same thing as like building a house and doing anything like that. You need to build the foundations before you can grow. So I try to understand as much, I read as much of the complexities of things, and then I strip it right back, and then I try and tell you it from my perspective, and then from there you can add on and figure it out for yourselves, in a sense. So having a kind of the simplistic version of it sometimes helps. Okay, so I myself personally would describe the Bhagavad Gita as skill in action, saying yoga is skill in action. And Patanjali would say it's the cessation of the fluctuation of the mind stuff. So what precisely is skill in action? Well, this is when I go on about sitting in the eye of the storm. So the storm's like going, and, you know, as I was saying about August being a bit crazy, you know, from the planetary alignments, you know, it's because of Mars being in Aries and all the different the aspects. It's going to be an explosive month, apparently. So the microcosm, the macrocosm. So it could be with relationships and friendships, family, all that sort of stuff. But also, we've already had the really sad, you know, thing happening in Lebanon. We've also had an oil spill in the Maldives, is it? Or yeah, something like that. But I mean, that's pretty awful. There's been a plane crash in Kerala, and then it was just today in Indonesia. There's been a major volcano eruption. So yeah, and we're not even halfway through August yet. So there's lots of stuff going on. So when there's stuff going on, we learn to sit in the eye of the storm, not allowing the storm to take us. We try not to be too affected. So it's not about not being empathetic or not being compassionate. It's about not taking other people's stuff or other stuff personally. We can use our, our samskaras, our memories of what's happened to us in our life to have an understanding of things, so we can empathize. That's why we have challenges. It is an opportunity for us to grow and evolve as people. But by sitting in the eye of the storm, it teaches us to choose whether we're going to act or and whether we act accordingly. We're not going to react. And if we do act, or we sometimes don't need to act at all. It could be somebody acting out or somebody saying something almost to try and trigger you in a sense, and learning to go, wait a minute, I don't need to say anything back to this because it's not my stuff to own. You can step out of your own way and step out of a situation. And that's not about stepping away from everything. I'm not speaking about practicing skill in action is not dissociating. And I know that that's something that I was very guilty of as when I was younger, because I've been brought up in a lot of conflict. I thought because I don't want to be part of any sort of conflict, I stepped away in a sense that I never set healthy boundaries. I just didn't want to cause conflict. I didn't know that setting healthy boundaries was an option. So choosing to act and to be firm and to speak your truth is acting. Sometimes you sometimes have to act, and it's the same thing with the satya, this truth thing and owning your truth. And ahimsa, it's not about stepping away. If you see somebody being hurt, by stepping away from it, you're not practicing ahimsa in a sense, because you're allowing hurt to happen. So it's about sitting in the eye of the storm and choosing, making wise choices. So by applying the Bhagavad Gita's principles, it really helps. So unfortunately, the book from the reading list, nobody can get a hold of because it's such a good book. So I've written as much as I can about the Bhagavad Gita for you. I've put links onto your Facebook group this afternoon for you to go into and investigate. And I really advise you to try and find as much information as you can if you are interested in it. And there's so many different other variations of the Bhagavad Gita that you can go into, but we don't need to delve really, really deeply into it, because it's only a 200-hour. I've got deep, and I really, really feel strongly about the philosophy of yoga and what yoga really is, so that you can really teach from the heart, and it's not just a fad. You see people that get their yoga certificate, teach a few things, and then they get bored with something, go on to something else, and decide to do something else. It's to have that deep love for something deeper, something deeper, that deeper connection, and that's where some of the philosophies are. And the Bhagavad Gita is a beautiful story, and I'll kind of break it down a little bit, and then I'll go deeper, and then I've written a PDF for you as well. But it's basically a long poem within this massive book called the Mahabharata. and it's a massive poem. And in the poem is a battle. So it's basically, and it's basically Arjuna is about to have to take, he's on the battlefield of life, basically. So you're kind of applying the story. You're not supposed to take it literally, although you can because it's a story. But he's a way to, I mean, it stems from his cousins. He's in a battle. He's about to have to fight his cousins, and he doesn't want to. But his cousins have the two kings who were brothers. His uncle, had not done. Had actually basically cheated the other side of the family, and he had to, because they weren't ruling the kingdom very well, and they shouldn't have been. He had to fight his cousins to do the right thing, to basically save the kingdom. But being a kind person and being, knowing about the worth of family, he didn't want to fight his cousins. So we've all been on the battlefield of life, in a sense, and we've known what the right decision is, but sometimes the right decision is sometimes the hardest decision. And my the way I would apply it for my life, because everyone has different themes in their life, and one of my themes is terrible relationships, really. But they've been experiences. I don't actually regret any relationships I've had, and they've been huge learning lessons. And the thing is, it's all about balance. So the ones that have been the most probably traumatizing have also been the most passionate. So you can have you have been reading into my my Vedic astrology, where you can suss out parts, your north node, south node, all that. And it was like one of the themes is relationships. I'm either going to be in incredibly passionate relationships, but then with some big beginnings and big endings, and they're going to be short term stuff, not long term, or I'm going to be going for safety and be really frustrated and bored with it all. So so being the sort of person that I am, I've tried to do the safety thing and married an accountant, and that's really boring too, so but it was him that had the affair, so there we go. So anyway, that's too much information. But I'm speaking about the Bhagavad Gita. It's a handbook for life, and this is this is how I would apply it. So I think at the end of the day, Patanjali or any other, ancient sage would tell you it from a different perspective, because he's not lived as a Western woman and had relationships. So the way I can apply the Bhagavad Gita to my life and share it with you is through my experiences, and my experiences probably can tend to be a little bit more relatable than an old man who's lived in a cave, hopefully. So apologies for some of my too much openness and honesty, but it means you can apply these things. So sometimes the choices that you have to make on the battlefield of life, like fighting your cousins, I've not had to fight my cousins, luckily, but I've had to end up having to end relationships. It tends to be, I finally go, do you know what, this is really, and you're trying to do the right thing, and when you really love somebody but they're not right for you, that is Arjuna on the battlefield of life choosing to fight his cousins. That's you performing your dharma, and it's not saying that what had gone before was wrong. It was part of your dharma too, part of that lesson. So nothing that has ever gone past me, or the decisions that I've made that possibly weren't wise, that was part of my dharma as well. So if you've made decisions in your life that possibly led to not the right thing happening, but it's led to lessons, or it's led to something. It's led you to everything that you've done and you've made decisions on. Life is a series of decisions. Well, it's taking you exactly to where you should be. So nothing that's ever happened to me, I don't think it's bad luck or it's terrible. I have no judgment on myself or others, and I can say bad relationships, it was just it was a fluctuation of really good and really bad, and that's not equanimity. You know, it was almost like it was what I've always known, you know, in my life with my mum and dad, always having affairs and fighting and everything. So I didn't know any, you know, I didn't know what normality was in a sense. And now I've learned I'm doing my own stuff. And as a yogi and as a teacher trainer especially, I have to live and embody what I teach and what I practice. So I have to live in my life where there's equanimity and there's not drama, and some of it is like through my choices, because I've chosen men that probably were very exciting and, you know, or very disruptive but interesting. That's not healthy or good for my life, you know. And being like that isn't good where you're still trying to practice and meditate. You're trying to keep this going and teach it when your personal life's like that, you know. And it's almost like you're not practicing ahimsa. So making decisions in your life, and you know, so that's part of my life path, and I'm sure not you guys' lives perhaps probably haven't been as tumultuous with relationships as that, and then maybe have been, but it might be your lessons in this life are different to mine. We all have been given different dharmas, we've been given different ways of being, and it's about performing our dharma correctly, or doing the things that we are here to do. And a really interesting thing, speaking of dharma, because this is a huge thing to do with your last exam papers. So as much as it sounds like I'm speaking a lot of my own stuff, and this is all very relevant, and this is to do with the Bhagavad Gita. So I was speaking to Kirsty earlier about this. You know, I'm doing a lot of shamanic womb healing, goddess stuff. I'm considering, because I'm doing a lot of that work, and I work with moonology and goddesses and energy work as well as everything else. I'm considering you know, taking on the training to become a priestess, where you can do healing work with women and use the goddesses with that. So, and I've been doing a lot of studies with that recently. And one of the things yesterday that really resonated, and I don't know if this weekend's been really heavy for any of you guys as well, because we did enter the Lions Gateway portal, and it's been, and you're on a journey just now. So I would imagine it's affected you in some way, whether it was just energetically, you were tired, or you felt poorly, or you felt emotional, or you felt really like, whoa, it will have affected you all in different ways. But one of the things that came to me was, you'll be told as a woman, you know, we'll be told that we're too much of something, you know, and it might be too sensitive, or too quiet, or too loud, or too, you know, that you're always going to be told by somebody in your life that because you're a woman and you're supposed to just be good, that you're too much of something. And when I you know, I read that, or this weekend, it really touched a part of me, because the last time I saw my own mother was last Christmas Day, and it was a learning experience, because it made me see things finally for what they are. But she said, oh, well, you're too complex. You're too complicated. I don't know you. I'll never know you. I don't really want to know you. Why can't you be like your brother? I remember being really, I sat in the eye of the storm, and it suddenly dawned on me, oh, that's why I've always tried to get people to like me, or I wanted people to like me, because I always felt that deep level of unlove for my own mother. And so it was almost like, so it's not that there's something wrong with me. My mum's just never really liked me. So there we go. So it was very much that, as much as it should have been really, it was hurting at the time, but it's been a revelation. So now I can suddenly move forward and know that I'm not bad. It was just that was the parent I was given. But that too much of too complex, too complicated, I've been trying to make sense of it. So basically this weekend, this person said that too muchness that you're told you are, and I'm sure you've all been told in some way you're too much of something by somebody, okay? That's one of our gifts. That's something that we're here on this planet to give to other people. So I'm like, oh, and she said that, right, if you've told you're too sensitive, well, if you're in an office job that's really stressful and it's open plan, having the gift of being too sensitive is probably your job. You're probably not well suited to be in a job like that. So think about what your too muchness is, and how can you use that too muchness and apply it to your life and use it to your benefit so you can share your gift with others. And it really resonated in the fact that too complex, too complicated, what's that all about? What's the meaning of life? You know, like the philosophy, you know, what do? I teach too much, too complex, too complicated issues that a lot of people go, oh, that's a heap of rubbish, or that's too intense for me, oh, I don't understand that. And I try and get hold of this complex, confusing, deep, intense stuff and try and make sense of it, simplify it, and apply it to my too muchness and try and give it back. So I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'm not that bad, you know? So looking at that, that's a dharmic thing. So that might help you guys with your dharma, in a sense. That helped me this weekend, because there'll always be layers. It's a bit like tidying your house, you know, the same with meditation. You tidy your house and then somebody will come along, or you'll come along and make a mess of your kitchen, you know. So it's the same with doing your so, well, see, you've got to see how you can how you can apply that to your life. So you'd be good at teaching. There you go. Telling everyone where to put themselves. Yeah, so it's just you, when you're doing your practices, no matter, you'll never, unless you're an enlightened being, there's always stuff, you know. You can go, all right, oh, I did really well there. I processed this and I processed this. Since you process something else, those little dark corners of your soul will go, hi, how are you? And just now, until for this month anyway, energetically and planetary, you know, there's lots of stuff that's going to be looking us, and since March, this has been since March. Interestingly enough, lockdown was in March, but the stuff that we're processing, that when we've done a lot of if we've done our work by autumn time, I think it's October. I can't tell you I can't remember the precise date. But if we keep doing the work, as difficult as it is, because sometimes it's easier just to you know, put your hoodie up and have a wee cry and watch rubbish on TV and eat crap. But if we keep processing and keep doing our stuff, then when it comes to autumn, if we've done our stuff, the energy is going to be lifting, and we're going to be able to step into our light. Whereas if you're not putting in the work, because it's the beginning of a 12-year cycle. So if we've not been putting the work in, we'll be stuck in that 12-year cycle. So actually keep going with it, keep going with it. But it is a really intense time. And as much as it's an intense time for everyone, it's very intense when you're on a yoga teacher training. So I get that. So hence the reason I keep telling you that I am here for you if you need a video call or if you've got anything. So let's really go into the Bhagavad Gita here. So I've written it in some little bullet points. I've got vocabulary, and it's just to break it down so it's not so intense, so that when you do want to get a translation, I've got a little booklet that I'm going to put into that's like a translation of the Bhagavad Gita for you as well. But if you do choose to go further, you can get audio books. A lot of my graduates, as well as using the Stephanie Rupp book, they downloaded audiobooks. So when they're out and about, they're driving in their car, they listened to the audiobook on Bhagavad Gita, and listen to different parts and kind of let it sit with them, because it's quite heavy stuff. It's a little bit like reading Shakespeare. I love reading Shakespeare. I am one of these nerd type people. A sentence in Shakespearean can mean almost a few paragraphs. There's so much to it. So it's the same with some of the Bhagavad Gita, and it has such depth to it, which I quite like. And so yeah, that's one of my too muchness things, so let's look at the vocabulary. So Arjuna, so we speak about Arjuna. He's the warrior prince who faces a moral crisis. And then the Bhagavad Gita, it's a portion of the Mahabharata, which features a dialogue that takes the soul on an inward journey, culminating in the ultimate state of yoga. So yoga, unlike the sutras, the asanas were mentioned. The asanas were mentioned like 4 times in 196 sutras, but it's basic that yoga sutras are all about yoga. The Bhagavad Gita doesn't mention really asana, but yoga is mentioned a lot in the Bhagavad Gita. So it is it's a very important scripture. So another thing that is spoken about is detachment. So it's doing the right thing for its own sake, not for the expected results. So that's also part of karma. Doing something as a karmic, that's the dharmic action as opposed to a karmic action. So people karmically do things to, people will do something expecting something back, or they'll do something because they want something back. That's a karmic action, because you expect there's like something back. Or if you do something, there's going to be, there normally is like a karmic reaction to it. But a dharmic action is doing something and not doing it because of the fruits, because they're wanting to bear the fruits of their own actions. They're doing it out of the greater good. They're doing the thing for its own sake and not for the expected results. Okay, so that's doing it with detachment. You're not attached to the results. Okay, and then there's Krishna. So Krishna is he's the incarnate God. He's in the form of the charioteer in the Bhagavad Gita. So he is the God that appears to basically help Krishna. Him and his Arjuna and his cousin were given at the beginning the choice between having, one of them could have Arjuna just to give them advice, and the other one could have Arjuna's Krishna's army, and the cousin on the other side chose the army, and Arjuna really did think that, you know, the other ones have got the army, I've just got this guy telling me what to do. What am I going to do here? But there's more to it in the sense that it goes deeper, and he's the charioteer. So, you know, Krishna is the charioteer. He's driving the chariot. And so you start asking, there's the question of, you know, we were speaking about manas mind and bodhi mind, and don't worry if you've missed the lives on this, the 4 different parts of your mind, and the part of our minds that we want to harness, that we want to be holding the reins, guiding it, is bodhi mind. This is your discerning higher part of your mind, as opposed to your manas mind. That's your reactive, almost caveman mind, where you're going, oh my goodness. So you do not in your life want manas mind to be holding the reins of your chariot. You want bodhi mind to be so the horses are the mind, you know, so you're looking at the different you're looking at everything in the Bhagavad Gita and applying it to your life and different things. So that's what makes it really interesting. I studied critical analysis of texts quite a few years ago, so I am one of these total nerds. So renunciation is active involvement without seeking rewards and results. So that's another theme in the Bhagavad Gita. So it's been translated as the Lord's Song, the Song of the Spirit, the Song of God, and the Song of the Beloved Lord. It's sometimes just called the Gita, and it's a portion of the Mahabharata. So the Mahabharata is an epic poem containing 18 books, and it's approximately 100,000 verses. So the Bhagavad Gita is just a little part of the Mahabharata. So the Mahabharata is said to have been authored by the illumined sage Vyasa. So I've talked about Vyasa a couple of times when I've spoken about the tantric scriptures. We've spoken about Patanjali and Vyasa. Okay, so the Gita is 700 verses, and it forms 18 chapters of the 6th book of the Mahabharata. So you don't have to remember that, but some of it's just interesting stuff. So it stands out among the holy books of the major world religions for its flowing Sanskrit verses, and it's a uniquely vivid portrait of the intimacy between humanity and divinity. This divine intimacy is revealed in the form of a dialogue that takes the soul on an inward journey, culminating in the ultimate state of yoga, in which souls unite with the heart of God. The first part of the Bhagavad Gita is about karma. It's karma yoga. So the second part is more heavy, where you're, oh my goodness, and that's bhakti yoga. It's the yoga of devotions. There's a lot of talk of God, and if religion is not your thing, I'm not a particularly religious person, I think of God as truth and love. So God is just what there is, the truth and love. That's all there is for me. And then the last part is jnana yoga, which is Jnana, and that is wisdom. That's having an understanding of it. So it culminates. I find that to be one of the more interesting parts of the Bhagavad Gita, but they all are important, and each one would resonate with different people. And the thing that I really took from the end of that, and probably the 10th time or something I've read it, because each time you get a different thing, it depends on what you get or where you are in your life, that anything to do with life, spirituality, yoga, everything's a paradox. And, you know, I keep going on about that, but it is. So that's why instead of getting wrapped up in the trying to understand in your head thing with life, sometimes it's best just to go, it is what it is, because there'll always be almost an opposite, which is true too, you know, and which is makes things interesting. And it means that when things happen, you can be the curious observer, and you don't get attached or involved in things that aren't yours to own, you know. So while many of the chief events and people in the Mahabharata have their own basis in historical fact, the poetic presentation in it has been arranged conveniently and meaningfully and condensed in the Bhagavad Gita for the primary purpose of setting forth the essence of Dharma. So Dharma is the key. It's really, I think, as human beings, trying to figure out our, you know, our purpose, which most people never do. But by practicing yoga and meditating, it helps us to have some more self-awareness. But that's why I've been like really interested in Vedic astrology, because it's yoga, Ayurveda, and the planetary alignments and the science of them all together, so everyone could have an understanding of the Mahat, what we're here for. And once we know that, we can apply some of the things that we perhaps need to know, because everyone's lessons are different. So the Bhagavad Gita is a book on yoga, basically. And the word yoga is found 78 times in the Gita, appearing in every chapter except 3. So the word yoga and related words such as yogi found 28 times, and yukta found 49 times, appeared 155 times. What sort of person sat and read that and tried to count the words? I don't know. They maybe need to get a hobby, I would say. But no judgment there, no judgment. So this means that in over 20% of the Gita's verses, the word yoga or its related forms appear. So this profound teaching is the book on yoga, because it presents yoga in the most comprehensive sense in the term and in all of its depth. So it's not just the methodology, you know, which the sutras are, and they are very, very important too. Okay, I don't want to just brush over that. The sutras are very important too. So it's important for the study of the student of yoga, because it can be regarded as the first fully fledged yogic scripture. The Gita speaks of itself as a yoga shastra, or yogic teaching. So it's restating ancient truths. Okay, so it's not just like a fable. It's truths that have been passed down by the rishis. So Gandhi said, I find a solace in the Bhagavad Gita that I miss even in the Sermon on the Mount. I owe it all to the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. So the Gita, which has been available in English translation since 1785, has also inspired many well-known Westerners, including philosophers Hegel and Herder, and Aldous Huxley, and Rudolf Steiner. Okay, so there's a lot of people who have been heavily influenced by the Bhagavad Gita. And when you think of Gandhi, you don't think of him as reading yogic texts. And he was a yogi, but it wasn't through him practicing yoga. It is the way he lived his life. And if you've never seen the movie Gandhi, you have to see the movie Gandhi. It's amazing. I've got my kids to watch that when they were younger, and they're like, I don't want to watch any of that stuff, and it's brilliant. Another amazing book on the life of an amazing man is Kundan, Kundun, and it's the life story of the Dalai Lama of just now, and it's one of my favorite films, and I got my kids to watch that as well, and they were like, I don't want to watch it, but it gives you an understanding of the situation with China and Tibet as well, and gives you a deeper understanding of the Dalai Lama that we know of today as well. So yeah. So the Gita gives us not only profound insights that are valid for all times and for all religious life. Spirit is at work that belongs to our spirit. So it's relevant. It's not something that's ever going to date. It's not, this isn't a fad. This is like something that we can apply to our daily life. As I said, that, you know, we can read it from the perspective of our great old spiritual teachers, but these were men who had renounced their families to dedicate their life to their spiritual practices. We've chosen to be attached, and we've chosen to not renounce our families or anything like that, which makes it more painful and more difficult for us. So we've chose suffering ultimately, but with suffering also we've got, because we've chosen attachment, but it means that we can really apply the teachings and learn from them, I think, in a deeper level, you know. So let's look at an overview of the Bhagavad Gita. So Arjuna learns from his charioteer, the supreme Hindu deity Krishna, the meaning of Dharma, the paths of yoga, and the purpose of life. So Arjuna's impossible task is not of the type often encountered in heroic tales. He's encountering an apparent moral crisis. So the Gita teaches that the practice of detachment is doing the right thing for its own sake and not for the expected results. It describes renunciation as active involvement without seeking rewards and results. So the teaching is not that detachment is a lack of desire or aspiration or an impassioned life. Rather, it is a detachment from results. So we can still live interesting, passionate lives, and it's about not grasping and striving for the next thing and the next thing. It's the next thing. It's about performing what we need to do. You guys aren't, that's why I get you to sign do the certificate, no, do the little thing to tell me, or I speak to you before the course to find out why you want to be a yoga teacher, because I don't want people who just want to get a certificate and earn money. You know, that's not performing your Dharma. I want it to be people who are performing the Dharma. They want to share who they are from a yogic perspective, to give to others, to that's for the greater good. So that's a dharmic action. To go on a yoga course, to get your certificate, and then become a teacher to earn money. That's karmic. It's a karmic action, and that's not the energy that I want to have on the course. So it's about doing things and enjoying them. It's not about going, oh, well, you know, I'll do this, but it's about still enjoying life. So the Gita describes various paths or branches of yoga, including Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, and it speaks about Raja Yoga. So Raja Yoga is the king of yoga. So remember, Raja Kapotanasana means king pigeon. The Raja Yoga is what we practice, because that is the 8-limbed path. That's Patanjali's yoga is Raja Yoga. Okay, so the 8 limbs are discussed, and a lot of the other, the kleshas and the gunas and Purusha, Prakriti, it's all mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. So literature's heroes and heroines are often faced with impossible tasks. Hercules has 7 possible labors to accomplish. Cinderella must spin straw into gold. What did she? I can't remember that, but maybe it was. Was it Cinderella? Oh, you can come back to me with that.
Sleeping Beauty.
Yeah, I'm thinking that somebody doesn't know fairy tales. I read fairy tales to my granddaughter all the time. I don't remember Cinderella having to spin gold into straw. So anyway, that David Damrosch is some of its quotes that I've put into this PDF, and some of them are, George Forstein, and there's a lot of them that I know and I know of. This guy David Damrosch, I've never heard of him, but he's obviously never heard of Cinderella. So there we go. But anyway, Frodo Baggins has to smuggle the ring into the very centre of the armed camp of Mordor and destroy it. So here the impossibility of Arjuna's task is not an issue of strength, and the goodness of his heart is more an obstacle than a help to him. He can't bear the thought of killing his own relatives and bringing about the end of the whole world in which he was raised. So this is a test of moral fibre of an unusual sort, since you must commit acts that could well be considered immoral. So we can't use detachment as an excuse not to deal with fundamental issues such as livelihood, power, self-esteem, and relationships with other people. Well, we can, but eventually those issues will rise up and smack us in the face. So nor can we make detachment a synonym for indifference or carelessness or passivity. Instead, we can practice detachment as a skill, perhaps the essential skill for infusing our lives with integrity and grace. So the Bhagavad Gita, which is surely the basic text on the practice of detachment, is a wonderfully explicit on this point. So Krishna tells Arjuna that acting with detachment means doing the right thing for its own sake, because it needs to be done without worrying about success or failure. So at the same time, Krishna repeatedly reminds Arjuna not to cop out of doing his best in the role his destiny demands of him. In a sense, the Bhagavad Gita is one long teaching on how to act with maximum grace while under maximum pressure. So I know that from my being a teacher trainer, you'll find as a teacher, I had one of my teachers who graduated a couple of years ago message me just last week, having severe imposter syndrome. She was like, really, I think the whole thing with the online thing had got to her, it was getting to be too much, and she's like, I don't know if I'm up to this, I've got terrible imposter syndrome and everyone else seems to be doing so great and I don't know. I was just like, nobody, you're doing so online, she looks so, and I says, do you know what, have you given yourself a break throughout the whole COVID thing? No. Well, maybe have some time out and time to nurture yourself, reevaluate stuff, and know that sometimes we all have imposter syndrome. So I have it. I have that. I'm like, it took me years to eventually do yoga teacher training. My teachers back in 2008 told me that I should be training people to be children's yoga teachers. So because that was my original passion. So I ran, I taught yoga teachers in Mexico for my teacher for Frog Lotus Yoga, how to teach children's yoga, and they paid me for it. And that was like, I had total imposter syndrome. Like, what the hell am I doing here? And when the first, so I sometimes still have that. You're like, what am I doing telling other people how they should teach yoga? Who do I think that sort of way, like, oh God, they're listening to me, and this is the same thing. So a lot of my yoga teachers will go, oh, I've got severe imposter syndrome, but actually, sometimes things hit you, and this whole thing with like going online was a really scary, awful thing. But what could be the worst that happens? It doesn't work out, and so or people, you might not be very good, or people might think you're terrible. So basically, when I get that kind of feeling, I come back to the Bhagavad Gita, and you realize it shouldn't be. You shouldn't choose to do something based on, or choose not to do something based on what you're scared of as well. You're scared of judgment, you're scared of failure. It's one of my things is, oh, failure, you know, because then it will be proven that I'm rubbish, you know. And actually, that's my own shit. Push that away. What do I enjoy? I enjoy teaching and sharing and holding people's space. You know, as long as it pays the mortgage, I'm doing what I love and what I enjoy, and now I'm not attached to the fruits of my actions. And, you know, and that's the thing. So when you make a decision, or whether you choose not to make a decision, sit back on it, do your wise choices thing and go, am I not doing this thing because I'm scared of the fruits of the actions of it? I think that instead of, you know, like you can turn it, you know, the paradox, or turn it on its side. I think sometimes in life, especially just now with the collective consciousness of fear, sometimes people, especially women, are not acting and doing things that they want to do, or they're being drawn to do because they're scared of being judged, or it going wrong, or, you know, it's being a failure at it, or not being enough, or you know. So that's the same. It's the same but different, as they say in Thailand. It's very much like, make sure that when you choose not to do something, or you choose to do something, it's not based on the fruits of your actions. So this is very much that's why it's a handbook of life, because it does teach you to sit in the eye of the storm and, you know, take out your invisible Bhagavad Gita in your head. How can I apply this on the battlefield of life? And is this my shit that I need to actually step away from? Or is this my intuition guiding me in a way that's very appropriate? Because sometimes it's not your intuition, it's your samskaras, or your fear or trigger of something that's perhaps happened to you, and it's your mind is thinking it's keeping you safe, and because something has happened. Sometimes that is something you don't need anymore. So this is where yoga, meditation allows you to see things in a way that's more beneficial to you. So it's a multi-layered manual for living. It's the ultimate self-help book, basically. How do we act in a world of conflict and suffering? So that's the question that the Gita answers. So it's declared to be the essence of the ponderous 4 Vedas, the 108 Upanishads, and the 6 systems of Hindu philosophy. This is Samkhya is one of them, remember? So the underlying essential truths of all great world scriptures can find common amity in the infinite wisdom of the Gita's mere 700 concise verses. So it's the deeper you dive into it, the richer the meanings you get. So as I said, I've got about 10 different versions of the Gita I've got my own little library. There's books that I'll never give up. I'm such a sadhu there, but I like to read so many different versions of the same book, same with the sutras, so that I can teach it in a way that feels right to me, because each version is somebody else's kind of subjective opinion of what they've learned about what the Gita means. Because as I've said to you before about Sanskrit, it's the same as Shakespeare. A Sanskrit word has a vibrational frequency that means far more than just that word, you know. Shanti, which means peace in English, but it means more than peace. It has the feeling or the vibration of peace, which is so much more. Okay, so so it's very much, there's so much that Gandhi's written about it as well, which is really lovely. And then there's the Trappist monk Thomas Merton. So he wrote about the significance of the Bhagavad Gita, And he said that Arjuna has an instinctive repugnance for war. And that's the chief reason why war is chosen as the example of the most repellent kind of duty. So the Gita is saying that even in what appears to be the most unspiritual, one can act with pure intentions and be guided by Krishna consciousness. So this consciousness itself will impose the most strict limitation in one's own use of violence, because that use will not be directed by one's own selfish interests, still less by cruelty, sadism, and bloodlust. So, you know, sometimes the things that are right are the hardest things to do. And I'm sure that some of the stuff that I've been speaking about, you can relate to some things in your life, and this is important. This whole afternoon's lecture about the Bhagavad Gita is important because this is all relevant to your last exam paper, and it's basically applying the Bhagavad Gita to your life. So then you can look at things and go, oh, okay. So it really allows you to learn so much about yourself. It's heavy stuff, but everyone that's done the course has said it's as much as it's heavy, they learn so much about themselves and about yoga in a sense that it gave it more. It's something you'll never ever leave. It'll never leave you. But being able to apply yogic philosophy, you know, the Bhagavad Gita to your life in your way, not from me telling you how it applies to my life, but I know that it's kind of helpful when I do apply it to my life. And it's sometimes amusing, so you're like, oh, for goodness sake. But as long as, you know, there's no judgment in the room, which is good as well. So the first organized and triumphant efforts of Indian theism, it was the Bhagavad Gita, and it formulated the identification of the Brahman of the Upanishads. So it's the Bhagavad Gita. There's so much here. I've written quite a lot, but I've given you links that you can go into, and some of them, it's like Yoga International, and if you find that if you're not a member of Yoga International, I stopped because I was paying £12 a month and never going on it. But it's good if you guys are wanting some good quality classes. If you're not, and it goes, oh, you've reached your limits. I think you're only allowed to look at 3 things from a month from them. You can find more stuff on the internet and to do with the Bhagavad Gita, and find things that really resonate with you. So I think it's important to do your own research as well, you know, so that you can go, okay, I understand it from that person's perspective, and or you can look at somebody else's perspective and think, really, you know. So I think that's the good thing about the internet, that you can make up your own decisions from. This is how I found some of my teachers, by looking on the internet, listening to some of their talks. You know, I knew that I had to, for this course, I had to do a little talk on what I was doing, you know, and as much as I felt uncomfortable doing it, I knew that it would give people more of an understanding. Instead of doing a social media post, there needed to be somebody speaking to say, this is what's happening. So that's how I make sense of who I'm going to go to with some of my teachers nowadays, because you get a vibe from them in that sense. So it's the same with your own teaching, your learnings. When you're studying stuff, you get vibes from different people, you know. So if you're looking to study Vedic astrology and Ayurveda, Dr. David Frawley is your man, because he as much as he doesn't have a very good screen presence, his books just make so much sense. And so it's different books as well. Sometimes they're writing, so it's not necessarily a video. You can find things on the internet and go, oh my goodness, that now makes sense. I've read it from that person's perspective, because they've explained it in a way that resonates with you. So and that's why I give you lots of different ways of having to try and understand, you know, the teachings, and I give you PDFs, and I give you links to other things. So hopefully at some point something will resonate with you, because everyone learns differently. Okay, so we're gonna after all that chat and the Bhagavad Gita and the path of life, I'll give you a little break. So we're gonna stop for a wee cuppy. So, you know, so that's it, coming up for 4:33. So let's come back here for 4:45. Is that okay? That gives you enough time to get some caffeine in if you're a naughty yogi like me. Okay, so I'll see you very soon. Okay, bye.